Herodotus does talk about many nations, some that still exist, many that are no longer in existence. It does describe them, tells us about the people, the culture, the customs, the economy, the geography, and one of the regions it does tell us something about is India. And he tells us this after Darius has become the king, and the description he gives of India is a kind of a tangent while he's explaining how Darius had instructed or had expected countries that were under the Persian rule to be sending tributes to Persia. So he goes on this small tangent where he gives us information about India. And he tells us that India was the country or the region that sent the highest amount of tribute to Persia in form of gold. And he tells us that the gold was so abundant in India, and part of that gold would be found in riverbeds, and some of it, or much of it, however, was being gotten from a desert that existed. He explained like kind of to the east of India, and that gold used to be gotten from the ground, or it's pushed from the ground by very huge ants. These ants, Herodotus describes them, they were the size of a dog. They were very huge, and the Indian gold miners would go to the desert during the day when the sun was so very hot, because that time the ants will be underground, and they will scoop the gold that the ants had pushed up onto the ground, and then they will run or go very fast because the ants will come out and chase them, and the ants were so fast. Now, this description of ants that are the size of dogs is one of those things that have been used to discredit Herodotus' histories, because most people have always been like, there is no way there were ants that were the size of dogs. This, and also around that part, in that part of the book, he also does talk about Arabia, in the context of explaining the source of some of the spices and mud, whatever that came from Arabia to Persia. And he talks about winged snakes. This is also another aspect or part of the story that has been used to discredit Herodotus, that there is no way that there were snakes that were winged. And he explains them in so much detail. But I was trying to do some research, and I realized that it seems like some fossils of winged snakes have been found in that region. So that kind of like shows that maybe Herodotus were not just creating these stories. Maybe there is some truth in it, or maybe much of it is indeed very true. So back to India. Now, a lot of gold was coming from India. Another thing it tells us about the Indians is that the Indians existed in many tribes. And these different tribes had different customs and way of living. But it does tell us that Indians had a skin tone that was close to the Ethiopians. They were dark-skinned. And this different, now he goes into telling us, there was, for example, this, he shows us that India has always been a place of a lot of contradiction. Like cultures that are very much different. For example, it tells us of a tribe that were called the Padians. And the Padians were a tribe of people who survived on raw flesh. They ate only meat. And in fact, he tells us they ate meat not only of animals, but of other human beings. That if a member of the tribe of Padians became sick, before he died, the members of the clan would take them and kill them and eat them. And if somebody didn't ever become sick and they grew to be very old, then the tribe would sacrifice them to their gods and then eat the flesh afterwards. And then he contradicts that with another tribe of the Indians who did not eat flesh at all. They survived on vegetables and fruits and seeds from the wild. And it tells us that this tribe did not even build houses. They just lived like that, no houses. They didn't do any kind of farming. They didn't keep any animals. Of course, they didn't eat animals. And he says that this tribe, when somebody became sick amongst this tribe, they would just isolate them and go to the forest and die alone. So the Indians they have always been a very diverse society. He also tells us that while some tribes of the Indians were very primitive and civilized, there were some that were highly civilized, especially those that lived near the region that used to be called Bactria, which today is like the region where we have Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, that region. And I was guessing that that could be most likely be Pakistan and Afghanistan. He says that the tribes in that region were very civilized. They had very organized society. So that's what Herodotus tells us about India. And he does say a lot. That's not everything that he says. I'm just picking a few things that he mentions about India. And I think there are other parts of the book where he also does bring up India when he's discussing different topics.